This is part 2 of my look at the Tomie movies. If you want to see me talk about the movies between and including Tomie and Tomie Rebirth, you can check out part 1. This is also part 4 of J-Horror Month. So if you're in the mood for anything else scary and Japanese, be sure to check out those too. We still got plenty more movies to go through, so we're gonna jump right back into it. Tomie the Forbidden Fruit, or as it's known in some circles, Tomie the Final Chapter, the Forbidden Fruit. And I gotta say, for what it was, Tomie the Forbidden Fruit, I might have had this movie all wrong. Initially, when I saw that we were losing Shimizu from Tomie Rebirth, but keeping on the screenwriter being Yoshinobu Fujioka, I was a bit skeptical as to what the quality of Tomie the Forbidden Fruit might have been. But now, having seen the movie, it's funny. I don't think that this guy is a bad writer. I Sadako 3D was cheesy, schlocky fun. I initially thought that Tomie the Forbidden Fruit was just going to be miserable, but it wasn't, and there's a couple reasons for that. Tomie the Forbidden Fruit stars Tomie, a lesbian fanfiction writer who falls in love with Tomie, the actual unkillable Tomie that we all know and love. This movie goes from lesbian undertones to lesbian overtones to just flat out lesbian tones very quickly, as we soon realize that this is a love triangle between Tomie, and Tomie's father, who is in fact played by Jun Kinimura, who has been in almost every single Japanese movie ever made, but the two that I'm gonna pick out are actually not Japanese movies, but most of you will probably recognize him from Kill Bill or The Wailing. So right away we have this weirdly refreshing setup of this offbeat love triangle between this father and daughter and Tomie. We haven't had anything like that before, and I like that it sets up the, for lack of a better word, good Tomie as a girl that's in love with monsters. In fact, early on she says that she's a vampire. So you have a girl that is pretending to be a monster falling in love with a monster that pretends to be a girl. Kind of poetic, right? Unfortunately, this doesn't really continue on throughout the rest of the film. In fact, a lot of the motifs that they were going for with the fruit and the lesbianism is kind of dropped halfway through the movie. Instead, we get treated to Basket Case. Just the movie Basket Case over again. And yeah, I was okay with that section too. Here's the thing though, I feel like this is the other half of the Tomie Rebirth example. Tomie Rebirth was a movie that, because it had such a good director, managed to pull everything together that the other movies couldn't quite get. And this movie has all the ingredients for a good movie, but it doesn't have a very strong directing force behind it. The script is not perfect, but I feel like even if you left the script exactly how it was, and you just brought on a more unique director, then already this movie would be way beyond where it is now. But overall, I didn't hate it. It's kind of low on scares and high on melodrama, but in that Lifetime Movie of the Week way, where the melodrama is so weird or cheesy or involves so many different threads that you can't help but just get kind of wrapped up in it. Now, I don't know if I perfectly understood all of the themes of this movie, because there's a couple of reviews on IMDb that seem to be getting a lot more out of Tomie the Forbidden Fruit. White House furious with stem cell debate, 23rd January 2006. I have been a fan of Junji Ito's work since Nighthead. Chances are, if it has his name on it, I've read it, seen it, or both. I was, of course, saddened to hear of Ito's death, as I've appreciated the awareness he's brought to the curing of spinal cord injuries. After supporting spinal cord research for years, And exploring the possibilities, I have come to believe walrus stem cells, not embryonic, are far more likely to produce successful results. There was so much potential here. The movie was slow-paced at best, the acting subpar, but what was going on here? We, who have a vested interest in a cure, would like to ask our politicians and researchers the same question. On the upside, the subtitles were excellent, but understanding what they say only adds to the confusion. Forget about taking cells at the blastocyst stage. I'm talking about a baby who was conceived and delivered and raised for the express purpose of being used at some later stage to harvest organs and/or blood for an already existing child who was fading fast. There's a lot here to explore. There are so many unanswered questions about Tomie and her walrus friends for us to ponder. Although we hear plenty of general testimonies that play upon our emotions, there always appears to be almost a black, accurate, scientific information about walrus cells. The Amsterdam Spinal Cord Society, to which I belong, will therefore be showing this film in January. Stem cells found in blood drained from human umbilical cords after birth can become many types of cells needed to treat disability and disease, such as heart cells, beta islets, and neurons. Or does she love to freak people out by appearing as a talking severed head? Tomie stays young forever, but does she need to be killed in order to keep from aging? This film is underrated. It's a little bloody and not particularly graphic, and would be fine for preteens and up. I have no words for what happened there. I have absolutely no idea. And that's why Tomie the Forbidden Fruit is getting a 6 out of 10. Nozomi Ando, the evil Tomie, is getting a 7 out of 10 for being pretty good. Her co-star Aoi Miyazaki, good Tomie, gets an 8 out of 10 for being the only Tomie that will ever have a character arc. Add them up together and you get a 15 out of 20. Or a 75%. What does that mean? I got no clue. Remember when we had good Tomie movies? Well, Tomie the Beginning is not one of them. I wish I could say that in this line of Tomie Rebirth, Tomie the Forbidden Fruit, that this was just a slight jump down in quality. No, instead the Tomie series decides to plummet off of a goddamn cliff. Unlike Tomie Another Face, this wasn't some sort of mini-series compilation, although you might be fooled into thinking that it was. Instead, this was a prequel to the first movie, and they even brought back the director of the first movie, Ataru Oikawa. Oikawa also directed the movie after this, so together we have a nice little Oikawa trilogy of Tomie movies here, and it baffles me that he was even brought back. The first Tomie movie is not really a movie that sticks with you, and while there was some scenes that I thought were directed really well, and there were plenty of other ones that were just flat. It doesn't even make sense why this has to be connected to the first movie. The only returning actor is Kenji Mizuhashi, who reprises his role as a character that I don't even think I mentioned in my review of the first movie because this character wasn't important at all. Outside of Kenji, there are no returning actors, but there's still a lot of references to the first movie for some reason, and that I don't get. Of course, being incredibly low budget gives this movie no favors with its special effects. Everything looks terrible, especially the body horror, because you cannot do body horror on a budget like this. So instead of relying on atmosphere or scares, at this point you have to rely on your actual story. And Tomie the Beginning was our chance to know Tomie and understand her. But Ring Zero, this is not. Ring Zero will be the shining example of creating sympathy for a horror icon for years to come. Tomie the Beginning goes right in the trash. They try to build up sympathy for Tomie, but it never comes across the right way, and it always sounds like she's just faking in order to manipulate other classmates, and you can't really have this whole sympathy, not a monster thing for a character that is earlier in the movie seen forcing her female classmates to eat bugs. And surrounding all this is a wraparound story that connects these really disjointed parts of the plot together, but by having this wraparound story, it kind of makes these parts more disjointed than they would have been just on their own. The wraparound does nothing but hurt the movie. However, without it, we wouldn't get to that movie-length runtime. Oh boy. If you took just the scenes that were adapting the very first Tomie movie and put them together, it would probably be closer to the length of an episode of the Tomie miniseries, and also kind of good, because the moments where Oikawa seemed to actually care about lighting and recting are those moments specifically adapting that story. The rest seems thrown in as an afterthought. Anything involving this wraparound or sympathy for Tomie is so disconnected from what could be considered the main story that you just don't care by the end, and there really isn't that much of a resolution. In fact, you're kind of just begging the movie to be over, and the only other films that I've done that with were the Lust of the Dead. You know it's bad when I am getting flashbacks to watching Lust of the Dead in your non-pornographic movie. So this movie was a waste of time. 3 out of 10. What about its Tomie? I don't think that Ryo Matsumoto herself was necessarily a bad choice or a bad actress, but I don't think she was directed very well, and scenes where she is trying to gain the audience's sympathy fall completely dead. 4 out of 10. Next, we'll be moving on to Tomie the Revenge, which I'm looking forward to even less. There cannot possibly be a Tomie movie worse than this. And I swear to God, if the next 2 are somehow worse than this, something bad's gonna happen. We're not capable of creating, as a species, we are not capable of creating a Tomie movie this bad again. Alright, so Tomie is the second in this direct-to-video movie series, little duology they got here. And it's already way cheaper. It relies on all of these cliches and rips off so many horror movies. There's scenes that are just stolen from Evil Dead, just straight up stolen. I was willing to give Oikawa the benefit of the doubt. After all, the first Tomie movie was doing something different. It didn't do it well, but it looked like it was what Oikawa wanted. There were scenes in Tomie the beginning that made me think that his original plan was something better than what we got. Tomie the Revenge has completely changed my opinion. Oikawa's a hack, and he should be banned from making any more Tomie movies. This is somehow worse than both of his other movies combined. But you know what? It captures mundane conversation to a T, because that is most of this movie is just characters sitting down and talking. In fact, there's one scene that just explains what Tomie is, which does none of the characters any benefit because, spoiler alert, there's no body horror in this movie, and regeneration is only a very small aspect. In this, they focus on Tomie possessing bodies more than regenerating and dying again. So already it's so far removed from the source material that I wonder why it was even considered a Tomie movie in the first place. Most of this movie is just idiots running around in the woods or at this one hospital location, and that's it. There's a mansion inside of the woods, but that's 3 locations for one movie. Not to mention that there's these bad found footage segments. The main character is literally just watching and I guess absorbing, but doesn't really comment on, and oh, whoa, Tomie was at the end of one of them. Nobody fucking cares. But it doesn't really go anywhere. Like, there's no new information that we get from these found footage segments, really. Eventually, the plot just goes to this mansion inside of the woods for really no reason at all. Every character knew that this place existed, but nobody bothered to check it out, even though it was literally one of 3 places that Tomie could have been. It's bad. It's bad, and it might be one of the worst movies that I've seen entertainment-wise. There's movies that have a ludicrous twist at the end, like Rasan. There's movies that are painful to watch because of how terrible the effects are and how dumb the plot is. But Tomie the Revenge is neither of those. It's its own brand of bad that just makes you miserable sitting through it. And it's not long either. This is one of the shortest Tomie movies, clocking in at an hour and 10 minutes of its full hour and 12-minute runtime, because the movie stops and has 2 full minutes of credits at the end for absolutely nothing. In short, Tomie the Revenge, not good. We're giving this a not good out of 10. And Henri Ban, the Tomie of this movie, we're giving her a 0 because she barely showed up in it. I don't see how these movies, this is our low point. And I want to talk to you, the audience. Well, take away the movie clips. I want to talk to you right now because we're at movie 7 of 9 here. I don't know. These next 2 better shape up. I will go insane. So please wish me luck as we go into Tomie versus Tomie. Tomie versus Tomie. We're finally here, I guess. Tomie versus Tomie is the 8th film in the Tomie series. Look, Tomie versus Tomie is not an interesting movie. The premise is in the title. Tomie fights Tomie, right? Wrong. The premise is actually Tomie finds the one man who doesn't obsess over her, and then she falls in love with that man. But unfortunately for us, he also happens to be the most blandest man in Japan. There's an interesting little thing about why he is not attracted to Tomie. He's not gay, I'll get that right out of the way. But I thought it was interesting. However, it's revealed to us right at the end of the movie, so the most interesting thing about him happens right as the movie is ending. So our options here, we have limited locations, a small cast, and Tomie is going after this one guy. Now maybe we could develop the other people in the cast and see them get manipulated by Tomie as she tries to get at this guy. No, they're just already completely under Tomie's spell, or the other Tomie's spell. But introducing that element of another Tomie makes things interesting. After all, we could have both of them manipulating different people, or even the same people, into doing what they want and undermining each other as they both actually they're really not going to interact until 50 minutes in, and then shortly after the evil Tomie, the more evil Tomie, is killed, I guess, because, like, she's an imperfect Tomie. She is technically killed here. Whatever. So then we're left with our final plot thread here. And in this last quarter of the movie, which drags on forever, we get the portrayal of Tomie that most plays on the audience's sympathy. Tomie versus Tomie, ironically, feels like somebody forgot to write Tomie in the script and just scribbled out the name of the original character and wrote Tomie instead. I'm not a big fan of sympathetic Tomie. I understand why she exists, and I think there's interesting ways you can do it. But the best entries, I find, have a Tomie that is much closer to Junji Ito's manga. This horrible monster that's disguised as a perfectly innocent girl. I think there's a fundamental difference between characters like Sadako and Tomie, especially in what ways that you can write them. While you can write either of them as a unstoppable force of evil, I think with Tomie specifically, you can't do stories that play on the audience's sympathies towards Tomie, unless it's all one big ruse. But usually you see through that pretty quickly. With a character like Sadako and her tragic backstory, I think it's easier to get invested in the girl behind the monster. With Tomie, it's much more of a case of the monster behind the girl. Tomie's outward appearance contrasts with her actions and her mutations. So why did I go on this little tangent? To be completely honest, I thought this tangent was more interesting than the movie itself. Despite having two Tomies, this movie doesn't really do anything with them, which is ironic. Twice the Tomie and half the action. You can write that on the box. So, for just being generally boring and incompetent, Tomie vs. Tomie gets a 3. And for our Tomie rating, you might think that we're rating these two Tomies separately, but one of them has way more screen time than the other. Yu Aibiru plays our main and prominent Tomie. And for her sympathetic portrayal of Tomie, I'm giving her a 0. But not because her acting's bad. In fact, I think she does a good job doing a convincing Tomie. In fact, the moments where she's manipulative or evil are easily a very good Tomie. But as for how this Tomie is written, this isn't Tomie. And most of this whole sad girl Tomie thing isn't what Tomie is about. And because it's so far removed from Tomie, I'm giving her a 0 because she is not playing a Tomie. She's playing Nanako or whatever the girl was, I don't know. But since there are two Tomies in this movie, we are dividing 2 by Yu Aibiru's score, giving us a score of... Remember that brief period of time where we had good to okay Tomie movies? I want to go back there. I don't want to spend any more time in this wasteland of Tomie movies. Back to back to back, we've had The Birth, The Revenge, and The Tomie versus the Tomie. And I think this trilogy right here might be the lowest point of the Tomie film franchise. It certainly is the point where I begin to feel the burnout. Tomie vs. Tomie does nothing new, nothing that any of the other films haven't done already. So I guess we better just finish what we started and watch Tomie Unlimited. Here we are at the end of our 9-film run of Tomie movies. And as I look back at the 8 other movies that it took us to get to this point, I wonder, was it all worth it? Was it worth it to go through so many boring and shitty Tomie movies to get here? Well, Tomie Unlimited is the newest Tomie movie, coming out in 2011. This is a semi-soft reboot of the series, as it brings together multiple different scenes from the Tomie manga that have already been adapted. Of course, there's no real continuity between these movies, so who cares? Tomie Unlimited is great. Let me get that out of the way first. Tomie Unlimited is a movie that I am going to recommend. And of the other 8 movies that we've talked about, there's only one other that comes close, and I would still say that Tomie Unlimited is the most entertaining Tomie movie in the franchise. You might think that I've lost my mind because I've gone through 8 films and now I'm finally at the end. The Stockholm Syndrome has set in. But that's not the case, because what we have here is not a Tomie movie. It's a Noboru Iguchi movie. Iguchi makes schlock. He makes the schlockiest schlock. He directed Karate Robo Zabogar and Machine Girl, just for reference on how schlocky he can be. Right around this time was the Sushi Typhoon Tokyo Shock group of directors making absolutely absurd movies, but ones that found international attention because of how weird they were. And let me tell you, this feels more like a Sushi Typhoon movie than it ever does a Tomie movie, and that is not a bad thing. The premise to Tomie Unlimited is that Tomie is Tsukiko's sister, who dies in a horrible accident, who then comes back and manipulates everyone around Tsukiko to hate her. And I think regardless of this being a Tomie movie, this is just an interesting premise for a movie. Add in the character of Tomie, and now you have a new and interesting take on the character that's really fun to watch. For the first time, a Tomie movie doesn't have any dull moment. The slow moments that it has are gracefully cut short, and the body horror is back thanks to our special effects supervisor, Yoshihiro Nishimura, director of Tokyo Gore Police, the latest Meatball Machine, my man. Now, I know what some people are probably thinking. They look at these effects and they say, what the hell? This is bad. And to them, I say, this is amazing. The gore effects, the story, all of it's really cheesy, but the movie's aware that it's cheesy. In fact, if you watch any of Igushi's other movies, he actually shows a lot of restraint when it comes to Tomie Unlimited, albeit in terms of Tomie movies, this is off the chain, as it seems like the entire world is just turned against Tsukiko by the end of this movie. And I feel like in this final act, you can really tell that Tomie Unlimited is using its premise to its fullest. Several iconic scenes from the manga are mashed together in what might be the ultimate Tomie fan movie. That is, if your fan doesn't have a stick up his butt about how hokey the effects are or how cheesy the script is. See, here's the unfortunate thing about Junji Ito and why adaptations of his stories rarely work. On paper, in black and white, Junji Ito can craft some terrifying images. Translate these images without nearly the amount of detail that goes into them into the real world in color, where it has to mesh in with real life people, will never work. I would even go as far to say that seeing Junji Ito stuff in motion somehow loses whatever effect the original had on me. What I'm trying to say is that the perfect Junji Ito anime would use the Gekimation technique used in Violence Voyager. What I'm trying to say is that if you can't elicit the same reaction that the original Tomie stories got from its readers, you can go in the other direction. Because bringing all this imagery into the real world will look cheesy. Even Junji Ito's dialogue and the way his characters will have some obsessive compulsive thing that turns them evil comes off as ridiculous when you see actual live people doing it. And I think Tomie Unlimited realized that early on and just decided to push it as far as it could go. And in doing that, it ends up being a somehow more faithful adaptation to the tone of Tomie stories than any of the movies before it. And so, for being the most entertaining and engaging Tomie movie, Tomie Unlimited gets a 10 out of 10. Really the last thing I expected when we started this trek down the Tomie movie lane was to enjoy the last movie the most. It's really a pleasant surprise. I think Tomie Unlimited is a movie that you can throw on with friends and enjoy the cheesy special effects and hammy acting. It's got that spooky atmosphere that's perfect for the October Halloween season. But it's not so serious that you want to sit down and watch it alone or have a group of people quietly concentrating on the movie. No, this is a movie that you want to watch with people. And I think it's the first one that I can recommend on this list that wouldn't bore everybody that you show it to. But what about our last Tomie, Miyu Nakamura? How is her performance as Tomie? Keeping in mind that some of the more recent Tomies we talked about have fallen short, there's still some pretty heavy competition for best Tomie. Well, let's go into it, because Nakamura has this unique look. She stands out in a crowd immediately, and I do think there is this kind of natural draw to her look, one that Tomie would have. She's also a total bitch, which is exactly what Tomie needs to be. She'll bitch at her parents only to manipulate them into abusing Tsukiko, and then she'll flirt with the judo club in order so that they can chop off someone's head. But most importantly of all, Nakamura has this smile that I think I've only seen in Junji Ito manga. She can switch from being a total bitch into being downright creepy, and I think every part of this is what Tomie needs to be. Nakamura and all of the body horror incarnations that Tomie goes through in this movie might be the perfect summation of what Tomie is. And so screw it, this is the last Tomie movie. We're giving Miyu Nakamura a 10 out of 10. If you watch one movie from this list, make it Tomie Unlimited. If you watch two movies, add in Tomie Rebirth.
Happy little pool of light, young, the rainbow, white, oh, white, and
And that's going to wrap up our look at the Tomie movies. Although Tomie never got her Ring Zero, she almost certainly got her Sadako 3D. But that's not to say that J-Horror Month is over. We'll be back with one final J-Horror video on the spookiest night of the year.